I am Geoff Eido. This is Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. That was a good one.
Yeah, I'm a wolf dad.
Yeah, you are. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I'm a wolf man. Shh, don't tell anybody, dude.
Late
Late
people
at
are gonna
night
find out
sometime.
on
I
their
mean, it's a
own.
full moon right now, you know what I mean? You got to watch out, but don't come across my door, you know what I mean? Careful. I'm a friendly wolf man. That was great. That was an excellent, I feel like
Thank you.
maybe that's the most authentic wolf howl that we've had on the show so far. I feel like both of us were really tuned into the wolf
Yeah,
energy.
we were synced up the whole time. It was harmonic.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah, all
feels
right.
good.
Let's do it again sometime.
Easy peasy.
Okay. Great. My guest today is Johnathan Human. He is a good friend of mine. He's I want to say spiritual leader. I think that's fair to say. Spiritual facilitator. Maybe that's better. He's also somewhat of a poet and a musician and a really good man all around. And he lives up here. So please welcome Johnathan Human. Thanks for coming on the show, brother.
Thanks, brother. It's good to be here, Geoff.
Yeah.
Nice to be here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Yeah, I'm just curious. What's up with this podcast? Lunacy, how long have you been doing it?
Well, we've been going about a year and maybe a year and a half now. I
Year and a
think.
half?
What are we
Okay.
in? What are we in? We're in September. Year and 9 months.
Okay, so
Started,
which
like-
episode am I?
You were 71, my friend.
I'm 71.
Aren't you stoked
okay.
about that?
Okay, great.
It's a
I
really
like
good
that.
number, 71.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you do this podcast, you interview people, and it's your intention to discover the commonalities we share with the moon. I heard something about that, or
There's a little bit of that. There's a
The
little bit of just
profane, the
kind
sacred?
of the insane and
insane.
and the sacred, discerning the sacred from the insane. So it's a consciousness raising type podcast, you know, where we also talk
not the
about some other shit.
profane, the insane.
Not the profane, the insane, but
Yeah.
sometimes we talk about the profane too.
Yeah,
And if
okay.
you want to talk profane, we can.
No, I'm just trying to get my bearings here.
Yeah.
So okay.
So I interview people that inspire me in some way, and or people
thank you
that
for
I
having
feel.
me then.
Yeah, you're welcome to the club.
Yeah.
And or people that I feel like we could have a productive dialogue and discover some things that would be helpful to people listening and to us also, and get some more clarity and, you know, find the good way in this life. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So Johnathan and I met. Johnathan hosts Wachuma ceremonies. We can fully talk about this because now it's legal.
Yeah. I have a branch of the Oklahoma Native American Church. Blessings and bless up to all of our relations through the mother church out in Utah, so yeah, my branch here in California, in Nevada City, is called Wachumans. So it's Oklahoma Native American Church branch of Wachumans. And we do mostly San Pedro ceremonies. That's my primary sacrament. And so I help people pray. Jeff came to one of my ceremonies, and then he came to another one or two, three. Yeah, and
I got 3 under my belt.
and now and they said, "Hey, I'd like to do this podcast with you." So I said, "Sure." I'm honored. So
Yeah. So that's great. I really appreciate that. And, just to give people a little insight on how it is that those ceremonies go. Can we talk about the logistics, or is that...
I don't want to talk too much of the details, but you could tell me. You could maybe speak as to how it's
Okay.
benefited you. That's something.
So
that's
it's
great
a
to share.
really great way to pray and to connect and to let go of things, and it's been super helpful for me. It's a really beautiful ceremony, and that medicine's really great and very mellow and just very connecting. It's been really good for my wife and I brought 2 of our friends from LA who came up. We didn't realize they were coming up the same weekend. We were like, oh, well, let's see if they want to come. And fortunately they did. And they both really loved it so much. They got so much out of it. It was really like a perfect timing thing for them. So, I found it to be really, really beautiful, very sacred, very humble way to commune with Creator. And, that's great. So Anyway, that's why you're here, man. So we can talk about that stuff. Let's take it back. You could even go. I mean, you can go back as far as you want. How you discovered George and your own personal journey.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you. We'll jump in where we can fit in. I brought a book, 2 books that George wrote. Clear and Simple Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got this other book. It's a children's and adult book called Medicine Path in a Good Way. And you can buy them online. So George Gray Eagle Bertelstein passed the spirit, in November of last year. And so he had given me his altar about 10 years ago to offer and to carry forward his Good Way lineage, which comes from a multi lineage discipline. He has Lakota and all kinds of different elders from different parts of the world who've influenced him and then therefore influenced me. But before I even met George, I was on the Wachuma path. I first time I drank Wachuma, I was 17. I was on the indigenous island off the coast of Panama called Kuna Island. It's a sovereign indigenous governed island, and so there was a biodiversity ecotourism conference there, and I was fortunate enough to get to be there. I was dating an older woman at the time who brought me, and then I got to meet Augustine Guzman, who is still my root Wachuma teacher, who I'll hopefully get to see later this year in Peru. And I remember at that time, this is what I'm like 25 years ago, I guess you could say, something like that. And he was cooking the medicine, these little star-shaped cactuses over a open fire with all of these sticks, and I helped him. And then after that experience, some years later, I went down to Peru and studied with him around when I was 21, in my early 20s. So about 20 years ago, I was already going to Peru. I already had a chanupa. I'd already had a lot of medicine in my life. And then what I really needed was a mentor. I got to meet George at a later stage in my life where I was really ready for like an anchoring point and some sort of a protocoled structure. I could hang my hat on, as you say, like a tree for the soul to roost within. Mm-hmm. And so he was very, very effective at being my mentor, role model, and adopted me as his son spiritually. And but I've also been so fortunate to have a variety of medicine elders and teachers from around the world. Tomas Pinkson, amazing author, Flowers of Wirakuta is his book. Still one of my teachers who I work with, and he leads ceremonies. And San Kaitumai from the Indigenous Institute of Arts. She's still operating and helping people, find their self through dance modalities and singing modalities, because sometimes people think of a Native American, they don't even know what the culture is because the culture has been obliterated, and it's like, I'm a white person, I'm not really like even shouldn't be even talking about anything, really, because it's like, what do I know? I don't know anything. I'm just who I am. But I've been so fortunate to get to pray with enough different elders and teachers. One of my highlights in my personal life was around the Eclipse 2018 festival in Oregon. There was about 30 plus indigenous chiefs who represented nations of their tribes from all over the world, mm-hmm. not just in America, all over the world, who were there for the solar eclipse. And they all drank my tea, and I facilitated their ceremony to some degree and their planning of their ceremony. And I was able to give my medicine to all of these elders. And I got to go home and tell George about it. He was around, and So Creator's blessed me. I've gotten a lot of amazing ceremonies, and hopefully the best is yet to come. That's one of the sayings I like to say is, may the best be yet to come. So maybe, I'll have another 50 good years in me, and we can be offering healing works all along the way. Yeah. And the medicine work is just one aspect of my life, of course, and who I am. So, mm-hmm. I was in the Cactus Garden today, and yesterday, you called me and you're like, hey, are you coming over? And I was like, I was in the Cactus Garden. My hands were dirty. I was working and I was over there all day today because I was like, what do I want to do before that podcast? I was like, do I want to go to the gym and work out, or what do I feel like doing? And I just wanted to do whatever made me the most happy. And right now, generally working in my cactus garden gives me just a great deal of joy. It's simple, it's basic, but yeah, I identify somewhat as a cactus in a human form too, a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you're prickly? Because
I don't know. I mean, it's easy it's a low hanging fruit there.
I'm sorry. That's the first thing I think of. But you don't strike me
my
as
socks
prickly.
did say,
oh, looking sharp. I don't know if you can see that, everybody, but
they have cactuses on them. My wife gave them to me. Yeah. No, I think it's more of the, the cactus looks like a cactus to us because we're human, right? But, well, it's not, as just a cactus, right? There's some form of intelligent spirit, as you can say, within this life form that looks like a cactus to us. And there's some ways in which that spirit is not bound by time and space the way we are. Even though it looks like just a cactus, it's not bound by time and space the way we are. Mm-hmm. And so when we get to take that consciousness into our beings, our consciousness can thereby be liberated to some degree from the confines of our normal operating system and our identity system and what's possible and what's not and all of these things. And it becomes trans-dimensionalized. It becomes, liberated from that little box that we're used to just sitting inside of. And so that's what I mean. I identify as a cactus being, because I've had enough cactus at this point that
you're part cactus.
I'm pretty trans-dimensional, man.
Yeah, I know. I can feel it. I wonder if we can do this part of this podcast in a different dimension, or maybe we already are doing it in a different dimension.
It's obviously happening, ineluctably co-occurring in another dimension. I mean, I think really like this is like a fractal holograph. We're in a simulation whereupon we're doing a podcast and a YouTube show.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the ultra dimensional beings who are deriving like entertainment from our lives all the time, each of one of us, like a reality show in real life, like God, spirits, like the real life thing going on.
Right.
Yeah. They're like, wow, that's so cute. They're doing a reality show inside of our reality show.
Yeah. It's like reality show within a reality show within a reality show within a reality show. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
I like it. I had something really peculiar happen with my cat the other day. Actually, after a ceremony, our cat, Monkey, he is a black cat. He is an incredibly sweet, kind, benevolent being. I literally wake up sometimes and the cat has his paw on my forehead, on my third eye, giving me Reiki. It's happened at least 3 times that I've woke up and his paw was right there. And he pulls it away when I wake up. And I'm like, okay, you can leave it there, man. Do what you do.
So then you pretend to go back to sleep so he keeps it there?
Well, it doesn't usually work that way.
No.
I try to stay. Yeah, he can sense it.
He can sense it. Do you think he's just trying to wake you up?
No, I don't think so.
Because that would be an easy way to wake you up, right?
Well, maybe. It definitely feels like he's trying to do some sort of a healing on
feels Reiki.
On data.
Feels like Reiki.
It does.
Yeah.
So he's a magic cat.
Okay.
And believe it or not, and you don't have to believe it, I don't really care. I care what you think, but I don't. You know what I mean? I don't care.
We should do a podcast with him doing Reiki on people, like just to show them that it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can ask my wife about it. He cuddles with her all the time, and it's super sweet, and all kinds of stuff for her. But anyway, so we went to sleep, and we have a closet door, like a walk-in kind of a closet thing, and we closed that door because it butts up against our guest room, and our friends were staying in our guest room, so we wanted them to just have a little extra privacy, us too. So we close that door when we go to bed.
Okay.
And it was closed, and he was with us in bed, and then he got up and left and went and did something. And then all of a sudden I heard him, maybe like 45 minutes later, I heard him meowing. And I got up to go check to see if he was sometimes like we close the door in the laundry room accidentally so he can't get into where the litter box is. So I was like, well, maybe that happened. No, it was coming from in the bathroom. And then I opened the closet door, which was closed before, and he came out of the closet.
So he was in the closet the whole time?
No.
Why not?
I don't know.
Why
Look,
wouldn't he just
this
be
is a
meowing?
very
He was
profound
trapped in the
mystery.
closet.
He
And then
wasn't trapped in the closet. He was in the bed with us.
He got into the closet.
The closet door was closed. Somehow he got into the closet through the door. And I was like, and then I started thinking about it. I was like, no, we must have like left it ajar. But even if we left it ajar, he wouldn't close the door on the other side of it. He would open it and then it would remain open and then he would leave. But that's not what happened. The door was closed because we closed it. And then he was behind the door. And then I had to go open the door to let him out. And we were flabbergasted. So, what happened?
All I can think of is your listeners who are dog people, not cat people, just kind of being like, where the heck is this guy going with this cat story?
That's where I'm going with the cat story. It is a profound mystery. We don't know how the cat ended up on the other side of the closed door, but he did, and then we released him. And he didn't say anything. He didn't tell us why. He didn't tell us how it happened, because he doesn't speak English.
Well, I can also hear the listener saying, well, this guy, got all medicined up at his ceremony, came home, might not have been thinking the most clear, might not have the most clear memory.
You could think that, and they could think that, but at this hour,
all they want. We know that cat is like baby Jesus reincarnated, right?
I'm not saying that.
You're not saying that. Okay.
No, I'm definitely not saying that. But I am saying there was some sort of magical thing that happened. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
You're supposed to be able to tell me, Mr. Transdimensional. You got the cacti in your balls.
No.
You should be able to tell me what.
Different.
I understand, but it's still the transdimensional thing, and the cat's on a transdimensional level also. All right.
I don't know much about cats or animals, man. I just know about cactuses.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If anybody out there has any idea what happened to our cat, and including you think I'm crazy, and that's fine, but it was really weird. Let us know what you think happened. Okay. Are you interested in sharing about how this medicine path has helped you like overcome addiction? Because I know that's some of your backstory. Maybe you may or may not want to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to. I mean, it's just all connected to, I guess, different things, right? Because, sobriety is definitely been an active part of the founding of the church that I'm a part of. Everybody goes to the church to pray to stay sober, to be sober, to get sober, more or less. No one's trying to get high. There's a prayer for lucidity, for clarity, for connectivity. And I guess I'm sober from alcohol, 12, almost 13 years now, and tobacco, in the same way. We have a relationship with tobacco, but it's not one that's consuming, not one that's for our personal consumption. It's in a sacramental way of praying with it and to use the tobacco in a respectful way to communicate with spirit and communicate energy to the spiritual world. The world right now, I do my ceremonies on the equinoxes and the solstices, but the equinoxes and the solstices also happen to be universal days of unification for the human species. And my nonprofit that I co-founded in 2012, Solstice of 2012, unify.org, in case anybody wants to check it out, facebook.com/unify. And we've done amazing things over the last 14 years since we launched. We've gotten to partner with amazing people and organizations, everything from, Deepak Chopra and United Nations and, Oprah and Sai Baba and all kinds of, I can't even list them all. It's like, it's so humbling, so amazing, to be able to work with the people who do waterworks, all the water organizations of the world who we synchronize with on Water Day to have a higher impact so that people can engage in a meaningful way with their waterways, whether it's beaches or rivers or however, access to clean water, building wells, things like that. So on World Water Day, which is March 21st in the spring equinox, that's when Unify has this endeavor to unify the humanity, unify the species along water and how to make our water better. And then there's other days of recognition that aren't on the equinoxes, like Women's Day is, it's not on an equinox or a solstice and stuff. Forgiveness Day, World Suicide Prevention Day. There's all kinds of days that we try to galvanize people around. But personally, at this stage of my life, I've just been enjoying engaging with the human species at large on those days in the altar, with the mesa, with the spiritual doors open, and the beings that are much higher than my comprehension at work, because I'm very humbly just a human. And so to get to know my relationship in my right place in the system of the world is important. It's not like I'm running the show here. In fact, the sun, Pachatata, Tatawari, however we use these indigenous phrases, Pachamama, the Mother Earth, these things, they have a great meaning. And I think a lot of the times in our culture, you got a lot of suicide rates spiking, at all this mental health and illness issues. A lot of it's because people are disconnected from their roots, from their traditions, from their past, from the cycles, from the seasons, from the moons, to plug into your podcast, and the natural world and their natural organism. It's like if you're a watery being, you're going to get kind of messed up if you're living in a dry desert. And sure, we can do that and create a pool in the desert and all of that, but I'm more referring to the energetic, emotional, social landscape that we live within, whereupon, like our kids these days and the youth and the grown up, a lot of people live in a world where they don't get any meaningful connection. They're isolated and alone, and they're kind of living in this social media matrix world. And it's very, very lonely. It's painful. Yeah. We need the real deal, Holyfield kind of human interaction, analog. Hugs. Yep. Hugs, nature, farm, river, these kinds of things. Yeah. And so when Unify does these international days, I've just gone to do these ceremonies now where that's the way I plug in. I know that there's all this amazing stuff going on and all these amazing people doing amazing work in the world, and I'm happy to support it. But at the end of the day, I'm just one person, and I'm just able to do what I can do. I planted, I think, 30 cactuses today or something, And
amazing.
If I can keep doing that every day for the rest of my life, well, there'll be a lot of cactuses around.
There would be a giant orchard of cacti. Is that what you call it, an orchard?
Yeah, it can be.
Cactus orchard.
Yeah, it could be a labyrinth, a maze.
Yeah.
Whatever we want it to be.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, that's definitely part of the reason that I wanted to have you on the show, because we on this program talk a lot about the need to really connect to nature, and what a difference that can make. And, there's all kinds of scientific actual evidence about it, earthing and, how we connect. And the lack of that in our society. And, now, as you say, you talk about the social media matrix, kids these days and people in general are just finding that they're getting many more of their needs met through social media, and how many people liked their thing or how many views they got and that kind of thing. And also shaming and hating people on those same platforms. And then that becomes the social landscape for kids that are in school. I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day who he went camping with his two kids, essentially stepkids. One's 9, one's 11. The 11-year-old was crying the entire time because she couldn't be on TikTok. Like for 4 days they're in nature, and she's just crying. She's so sad that she can't be on TikTok. And it's not like
the dopamine come down is profound.
Yeah.
And that's what, maybe some people don't understand is it's like a cigarette come down. Like if you're used to that every second, you're going to be addicted to that nicotine. And when you're used to looking at that phone every 7 seconds, a new thing, your brain is simulating a dopamine release. And so if you're used to that, then you're going to be depressed. Yeah, you're going to be in pain, physical pain. You're just like when somebody comes off heroin, they go crazy sometimes, and it's weird the psycho hallucinations that you see these kids have when they get their devices taken away when they're used to them, and they're used to them all the time. They're like dreaming and swiping in their sleep. It's weird.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's. I think it's pretty terrifying, frankly, and that's the direction that we're going.
It doesn't have to be. Finland just changed its policies. If you didn't follow that news article, they're switching back to pens and paper and taking the screens away. All the studies are showing that you shouldn't give screens to kids under 14 at least now. That it's essentially causing brain damage. It's like it's all evidence is all there. You look at the makers of the screens, the people who are making the devices. They don't give them to their kids until they're older, anyways. Everybody who knows, and now unfortunately enough people are damaged that everyone's sort of waking up to the dangers of devices for youth.
Yeah,
you got to let their brain develop a little bit more before they get immersed into that device world.
Yeah, go Finland. I had no idea. They just said, forget it. Put away your phones. We're going back to pen and paper. What do you?
Yeah, they're a very progressive country. They've
for the children or for people?
Education. They have the most best education systems in the world, and they pioneered the screens. They pioneered getting the tech into the classrooms, and then now they're pioneering getting it out. So I'd say that's
a good indication of what's to come. Hopefully, what's to come.
I love devices and technology are great. Not here to talk anything bad about anything. It's just right relationship, right? It's use. I'm not here to say nicotine is bad either. It's like somebody wants to have a nicotine patch or chew nicotine gum, great, but I don't want my kid on it. I think and so that's about it. It's just it's a healthcare issue for children, more or less.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
and there is kind of a I think I want to say it was you that told me that so many of the world's problems could be, or you had a teacher who said that so many of the world's problems could be explained by the fact that we don't have a right relationship with tobacco anymore.
Yeah, that's a indigenous chief. I can't remember right now. I apologize. Somebody out there will know that a wiser person than I said that all of man's ills are because of our improper relationship with tobacco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is really fascinating. And I used to be a smoker. I used to smoke cigarettes on the regular. In fact, that's why my wife and I did ayahuasca for the first time, because
you're trying to get rid of it.
I wanted to stop smoking.
And was it successful?
Totally successful.
Yay.
It totally worked.
Congratulations.
Miracles. But
how long are you clean from cigarettes now?
Well, how long have I been a non-smoker? It's been 4 years.
Congratulations.
Coming up in November. Yeah, thank you. I have since I've had tobacco in different forms since then, but I don't have it on the regular basis. In other words, I'll do hape and ceremony, which is,
I understand.
Okay,
you might have a sacred relationship once in a while now, but you're not.
I smoke the
You're 4 years out of the personal consumption relationship.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But also part of the deprogramming of tobacco. I read this book called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking, which if you're interested in stopping smoking, that's the book to read, which really de-shames and de-guilts the smokers' association with tobacco, and really points out all of the things that the tobacco companies have done to make it even more addictive, and all the chemicals that they've added, and how I, as a smoker, am lining their pockets, and I'm a slave to this weed, which is a great way to, when you start to look at something as if it's enslaving you, then it's a lot easier to liberate yourself from it, because once that becomes very clear and you see that, then the impetus to just want to stop and not start again, knowing that it's essentially a shackle on your life. And for me, it was at a point where if I were to continue, I was very clear that it would kill me, that I would die, like my grandmother had died, like my grandfather had died, like both of my grandmothers.
Thank you for choosing life.
Yeah, but you're welcome.
And giving that up.
Yeah.
In order to choose life.
Yeah.
That's what it takes sometimes.
Definitely. But I think what I think is also very interesting about what the indigenous chief said is tobacco really is a way to connect with Creator. Tobacco, in I think pretty much all of the indigenous traditions and so many other traditions, is a gateway to God or Creator, a way to connect, a way to send prayers to God, and to really ground ourselves in a good way. And the fact that we've I want to say pilfered it, that we've pilfered the essence of that sacred plant, I think has caused not only just a lot of cancer.
Not the only one.
No. Well, that's also what we should talk about that as well.
Yeah.
I think alcohol too, I know. I was
going to say coca.
Oh yeah. Cocaine,
Mama coca.
For sure.
What a sacred plant, the mama coca leaf, right?
Yeah.
But, as soon as the colonial settlers got their hands on it, turned into the cocaine thing, and then
mix it with gasoline.
Yeah, or how
create
about
a
opium,
super
right?
fine thing.
Really beautiful plant that has a lot of beneficial effects, and then there's like this, artificial opium wars that are created and stuff, and so many people die and suffering over just, the commodification, the extractive consciousness. So many times people get distracted, like, people will museumify something. They'll say, oh, well, that was the past. It's not relevant to now. Like the indigenous rights movement is in the past. Well, no, people are still being, disenfranchised, marginalized, oppressed, raped, killed, murdered, whatever,
sure. Especially women.
Just because they're indigenous,
Yeah.
All over the world, whether they're in everywhere. And so, it's important to have, consciousness. It's like, to me, that's the most important thing that needs further communication, extrapolation, understanding by the species. The humans on Earth are right now absorbed in a psychopathic behavior amplification strategy where it's like the rewards in society are for psychopathological behavior, corporate, abilities to do things that you would never do are rewarded. And so there's this
right, because of the bottom line.
Yeah, so you get this consciousness on Earth where everyone's absorbed in the material. They're absorbed in this meat stick
greed
consuming
matrix.
Identity matrix. Everyone's forced, and it's like the chickens in the factories with their breasts going big because they're shot with hormones and electrocuted. It's like that, but all the kids, all the humans are electrocuted so that their egos will get really strong.
Right.
They'll get a really strong sense of me and my, and and there's this
at the cost of the community.
Yeah, and for the species, for the survival of the planet,
right?
We're it's like we as a species, in order to, I think, survive, have to make an evolutionary leap in our culture. The blueprint that we're passing down to our generations right now. It's like the reproductive system of our culture is this media. It's, the television and the shows and all this stuff. This is the stories that we tell. This is how we perpetuate, propagate, and create culture. And so, we as a species need to start to put a higher emphasis on the consciousness of that we carry, what affects our consciousness, what kind of consciousness we're bringing, because science, of course, is showing us and telling us, all the evidence is showing us that all of reality, all of physical reality is in fact like a shimmering, coming in and out of existence at one time. And so there's this intermeshedness with consciousness that we can't figure out still, the quantum mechanics. If you talk to the Atmanauts back in the day, they of course say it's all comes from consciousness. And so it's the ground, it's the base.
The Atmanauts, the ancient Buddhists.
The ancient saints and sages of the Vedas.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's all super interesting. And I think it's important to mention that, there's some I think there's some concern about cultural appropriation sometimes in terms of like looking at indigenous ways and following them. But to me, if you're honoring the tradition, if you're honoring the indigenous tradition, you're seeing, oh wait, this actually makes sense. And this really is a gateway to truth, for me personally, and also associating with, my own ancient culture and my own ancient ancestors who also were indigenous people before, we got tricked into wielding swords and wearing armor and conquering people, etc. Like there is so much tradition in that. And so I think it's important to sort of make that distinction. I know that that's not a concern for you because that's not how you live your life, but I just want to address that because I do talk about the beauty and wisdom of indigenous traditions a lot on this show. And I think it's really important to realize that it's not taking something away from somebody else so that I can look good or we can look good. It's really honoring a way that someone else has provided and demonstrated so that I can live in right relationship with my community, with my land, and with the people around me.
Yeah. Well said there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I think that if anyone is interested, you just find a way to give back meaningfully, because pretty much any indigenous tribe in America or anywhere in the world is some of the people who could use the most help. That's about right. It. So it's not that hard to help. Sometimes you just try and figure it out. How do I help this kind of people?
Yeah. Go to Unify. You probably have a bunch of different outlets for that sort of thing.
Yeah, we do stuff on Unify. There's all kinds of causes. We do world indigenous synchronized ceremonies. We do all kinds of things. And cool. I'm very grateful that we've been able to help support different indigenous movements, from like the pipeline stuff back in the day and all kinds of stuff. Whenever there's something that's coming up, we want to try to unify people around what brings them together, around their shared interests and common goals. Yeah. That's the point of Unify, to serve as a platform for the species to attain single species awareness, so that we can behave as one.
Right.
It's the only way I see that we as a species will be able to modulate our civilization and our species and our culture on the planetary scale at the scale that we need it to, at the rate we need it to, would be to
really be looking from the perspective that we are all connected, 100%.
Yeah, and the power, how much we can affect if everyone behaves as one. Like if we're wasting all this energy fighting each other, there's all of this money being made and wasted fighting and killing each other. Whereas, if we just devoted all of those resources to educating, having a renaissance on our planet culturally, so that there is a thriving economy globally and everyone was getting uplifted, that now we're talking, that starts to make sense. But there's certainly some power structures that are entrenched in the way that business is run on planet Earth, and that's generally war.
Yeah.
Right now seems to be the big business.
Military industrial complex, the agribusiness complex, which I think is really just a byproduct of, the birth of the corporation and really creating like profiteering as a model for humanity and imperialism as a way to, get more for oneself. And then it gets cloaked and disguised and we don't even see it anymore, but it's always there just underneath the surface. I mean, I'm not trying to like dive deep into conspiracy theory, etc. I just think that it's very clear that, there are some actual ways in which we are being manipulated. We did a documentary project that has yet to be released on hunger. We went to Malawi, Africa, and covered this organization called the Hunger Project, and we started looking deeper into, well, why is there so much poverty in Africa? And then we talked to John Perkins, who wrote a book called...
I know John. Yeah, he's great.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Totally.
And he started talking about the World Bank and the IMF and essentially how, we're totally exploiting these people and having them do the opposite of what they should be doing to have a healthy economy, and then they owe us a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So that is an actual conspiracy that is actually going on, that is engineered by people who want to make a lot of money, and they don't really care who's on the other end of it, this psychopathic modality that you spoke of earlier. And I keep wondering, because I did, even in the pursuit of that documentary, which isn't finished yet, I did have some like weird things happen, which I'm not going to get into, but they were like just weird things, weird people talking to me that I hadn't met before. That was because we started asking questions about all this stuff. But I don't know how to shatter the mold here. Like, I don't know. I think doing medicine work is amazing, and having people wake up to the reality of their own connection to to the mother, to the father, to the earth, to their own spirituality. I think that's a great way to galvanize people to have a renaissance for their own life and who they are personally. But also I'm always puzzled by, well, how do we like really just shatter the mold where people are like, oh, I see all of this greed-based thinking and how the profiteers are working, and how even though I have an iPhone, that, by the way, I have an iPhone, that so much of it was made from, a mine in the Congo, where people were held at gunpoint, like where we can see kind of what you're pointing to, like having a sort of a one human consciousness where we're clear about all the different ways that things are made and how it is that we're making them. And are we making them for each other, or are we just making them so that a certain group of people can grow exponentially wealthy without any care for what's happening on the planet? So how do we do that, Johnathan? How do we shatter that mold? What do you got?
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't have anything figured out. But yeah, I mean, the people who are ultra wealthy they have all the money that you need. It's not like you even need more money. They make the money. It's just like a power of resources. So I think that you've got dynamics going on different dimensions, right? So like you've got the the Chinese and the Russian central banks, which are not necessarily in sync with the Western central banks, right? So you've got a economic incentive, you got this war, resources, you got all this stuff going on. You also got this celestial aspect to it, which I think is important to factor in, because if we're not just meat sticks meant to consume and die and have every aspect of our human social relations be like, capitalized into a commodified transaction, so that our taking care of our elders and our kids, everything's like transactionalized. If we're not that, if we are in fact a spiritual organism in a physicalized shell, and after this shell is cast off, we pick up another shell. If there's a multi-incarnational saga going on as we spiritually evolve over time, and in that act of incarnating and non-incarnating and learning along the way, we're in a symbiotic relationship with a plethora of non-bodied spiritual entities. Well, okay, so these are concepts that suddenly make a lot of sense for somebody like me. For somebody else, they might not make the most sense to, but it's like, if you can think about it from the lens of what kind of entity feeds and enjoys the suffering and the death of children.
Yes.
Well, if there was a spiritual entity that did enjoy that, then that entity is certainly going to be influencing the world to its favor, because it wants as much of that going on.
Right.
And so I think that we are in fact in a dynamic relationship at all moments with our consciousness. And so that's why, like, one of the other teachers that I had said to me when I was very young, he said, the whole world's the way it is because everyone is consumed with lust at the moment of climax.
Oh.
He said the whole world would be different if everyone was just praying to God at the moment of climax.
Yeah.
And not like God in some Christian or any kind of sense, but just think of it like in a material sense of like true self. Just connecting to one's like trueness versus like fantasizing about the girl you saw when you're banging the other girl or whatever the thing is that people do
watching
in their head.
watching
porn or whatever it is. And then he says, this guru says that's the reason the world is because all these people go to war, come back, and they're all messed up in their head, and they're making babies. And these babies are the result. These vibratory aquatic beings are the results of this. Our consciousness at the act of conception is important according to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say that every moment is an act of conception. Every interaction is a moment of conception. And so it's like we have a moment right now to spark a new kind of consciousness by because you're asked, well, how do you break the mold? Well, It's consciousness.
Right.
It's all consciousness, because if we're going to focus on the outside on something, I got to fix this. It's always these mirrored holographic loops that we never get into. It always has to be us into our own self. How do we heal, awaken, self-realize, commune, attain peace, whatever it is, so that we can navigate this world, not live in some cave, but actually be in the real world and then impact and impart and make a positive difference. Mm-hmm. I say that's the answer to your question, is no matter who you are listening, no matter where you are in the world, whether you're a Rothschild's heir or a peasant or not, you can be in any part of the human spectrum here, but we as a species can choose. Do we wish to be liberated or not? Do we wish to continue down this domesticated path? We're domesticated by beings we're not even allowed to seemingly talk about, which feed on our suffering and grief and shame. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm off, but
no, I think you're right on kilter.
There's There's something to be said for the resistance movement. The resistance movement is what Jesus was doing. He was resisting the Roman Empire.
Right.
Roman Empire was, doing terrible stuff. And then, his cult, the Jesus cult, was so successful, the Romans took it over, said, okay, we're going to kill you if you're not a Jesus follower now.
Right.
So then,
by the way, we're the gateway to the Jesus.
And now there's no reincarnation, and there's no more psychedelic Eucharist.
Right.
Because that's what Jesus was offering.
For sure.
A psychedelic Eucharist. So then Muhammad comes about as a resistance to the bastardization of the gospel. He lists Jesus as the last prophet and says, okay, here's the true way, because they've corrupted that. And now they're taking it down this other path. Yeah, so it's just funny, over the resistance movement over time.
Corruption there too.
Yeah, the witches were preserving the Eucharist. If you listen to Brian Morowski's book, The Immortality Key, goes into this essentially, where the witches were preserving the formula for a sacrament, a Eucharist, so people could not need the church.
Yeah.
So they were trying to kill the witches for years too, hundreds of years, going after they weren't witches, they were just humans.
Right.
Who wanted to be liberated,
yeah.
wanted to have the true sacrament, just like you and I want, just like anybody would want.
Yeah.
And we live in this new time where people are allowed to do that oftentimes, and depending on what state you're in and what part of the world you're in, it's like there's a lot more freedom now with psychedelics and plants. You can go to...
And awareness.
Yeah. You get all kinds of stuff now and not feel like you're going to go to jail.
Yeah, one of the things that was fascinating that you were talking about for me is, this idea that we are engaged in lust at the moment of, at the moment of orgasm, really, versus really praying to God. I just interviewed this woman, Roxanne Ruby, who's a big
I know her
proponent of Mary Magdalene.
Yeah, she's great.
Oh yeah, she is great. So we had a really amazing discussion about Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and how it points to that she was like this priestess who also used sex as a means of attaining higher states of consciousness, which Jesus was also went and studied in the East, and there's significant evidence that he studied with Tibetans. There's mention of him in the Dalai Lama, the ancient Dalai Lama's books, talks about how Yeshua came to visit and they communed and Tantra and that whole thing, and so. It makes sense to me. And also the first person that he, availed himself to after he resurrected, was Mary, his wife, if you believe it that way, which I do, makes sense. He was a rabbi. Rabbis had wives back then. She was with them all the time. They were making out according to some of the Gospels. So what's fascinating to me is that, first of all, that information is completely left the building. And what remains is this very strict, dogmatic religion and tradition in so many different forms that is puritanical and demonizes sex, and priests can't have sex, despite the fact that we see all these giant rates of pedophilia that just go unrecognized, frankly, by the Catholic Church, etc. And that basically God in those traditions has been captured, where Jesus said, my church is under a rock, and didn't have any sort of gateway to God. It was really looking at how do I achieve a higher state of consciousness? How do I achieve communion with the Creator? And then, he did. And like you said, it really got pilfered by the Romans. They took it and used it as a means of control and building empire. My whole take on it is the powerful seek to create more power, and there is this psychopathic energy, and whether it's man born or it's some sort of energy or spirit born or celestial born, as you were sort of pointing to, it exists. We're basically worshiping that as our God. We're worshiping money and greed as our God. The only way to shatter that is to really maintain and foster a connection with the earth and a connection to spirit and a connection to God that is solely your own as an individual, or my own as the individual.
Yeah. Well said. I'll just add, I don't know anyone on earth yet. I've never heard or read anyone who's presented this theory. So I guess this will be my introduction to the world, because I have a whole theory here for Jesus that I don't think anyone on the internet's heard yet.
I'm excited.
So here you go. I'm fairly certain that Jesus's biological dad was Indian. So he was a Brahmin priest who was traveling in the Middle East at that time, and was obviously wealthy and very profoundly spiritual, and Mary, Jesus' mom's very spiritual as well. But let's be honest, she got knocked up by somebody, and then he came back 9 months later with a bunch of gold and his 2 homies, and that was sort of the thing. And he said, okay, in 13 years, when he's of age, send him to India. And so when he got sent to India, he learned the Soma, because the Soma is the ancient drink of the Vedas, which if you drink it, gives you instant enlightenment. And so Jesus, they're still lineage holders of the Soma, and they make it, and it comes from a plant. And
have you drank it?
No, I haven't been fortunate enough to try it. I would love to.
Let's go.
Okay, great. Let's add it to the list. 100%. Right. I'm going to India in January and February for the Kumbh Mela, if you'd like to come, in Allahabad. Okay. I went last one 12 years ago. Cool. I missed the one 12 years before that. I almost made it. But anyway, so we'll see how this one goes. But I think that, Jesus' dad came through, knocked up Mary, and then her good friend Joseph was like, I'll take care of it. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. And then, he came back and had all the gold and stuff with the 3 wise men. He knew when he had to come back. And, other people say that Jesus was a hybrid being, half human, half something else. There are UFOs and lights in the sky that followed him around everywhere. There's other great book, Mushroom and the Cross, talks about how Jesus was essentially talking about fertility and mushrooms and helping people, get pregnant and die to their ego and different things like that. Did you and Roxy talk about the Merovingians and the blood holders of Jesus and Mary and what happened to them through the Crusades and any of that? No,
let's get into it.
You don't know any about that?
Let's get into it.
Yeah, so in the Crusades, the French interbred with the descendants of Jesus and Mary. They brought them back from the Crusades, and those are the Merovingian family lines in France. So if you research the Merovingians, just mentioned in the Matrix, Merovingians were the ones that, and it was popular it was popular throughout the 600s to 1600s or whatever. For a long period of history, it was popular to import a royal Jew into your bloodline. And, because if you're a royal, if you had a duke or you were somehow noble, if you had 6 kids and one of your kids was married to this, descendant of David, then you could claim that your kid could be, the second coming of Jesus or whatever it was. Like they wanted a bloodline that was, Abraham's bloodline. So they would import Jews into the bloodlines in different parts of Europe. Little known fact.
Wow.
If you want to research that,
Creepy.
You can.
Yeah.
But the Merovingians was fascinating. The fact that they saved these descendants of Jesus. But I think that Armenia, if you also look at it, Armenia was founded like right after Jesus died. It's the first Christian country. I would say there's a pretty good chance that a lot of Armenians are descendants of Jesus and Mary too, and those people as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what are the Merovingians? What are they doing? What are they doing now? What do they do these days? Just hanging out in France?
I have no idea.
Croissants and
I think they're long
drinking
gone.
espresso, smoking cigarettes.
It's an outdated term. I think it applies to a period in history. The certain Merovingian bloodlines, I'm sure, are still existing, and they still exist. But I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know anything about them besides the historical facts which anybody can look up.
Yeah. What's your heritage?
I'm Jewish, so my dad is Jewish. So my mom is an American mix of all kinds of things. And I've traced my ancestry far back on my mom's side, my dad's side, because the Holocaust gets pretty bleak pretty quick. Austrian, Hungarian, Ashkenazi, royal Jew, I guess, gypsy Jew, and gypsy on both sides. So I'm gypsy on both sides too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gypsy. I get it.
Gypsies are interesting people too.
Super interesting.
The Roma, the true people. Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole, in Umbanda, I'm interested in Umbanda. You could say.
It's fascinating stuff.
And there's the gypsies, the Saganas in the Umbanda tradition are these spirits that are kind of, they're a little tricky. They're tricking you, and they, you might break something or spill something or whatever. And that's the message is like, you need to be present, like pay attention, like wake up, be here now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, linguistics and all of the people who study linguistics have agreed that there's a Proto-Indo-European language, which, is where Sanskrit comes from and all of these languages come from. And it covers this massive geographical area, right? We're talking the size of, an empire, all of Europe,
but
into Asia.
Before Aramaic, kind of?
Yeah, before Aramaic. Proto-Indo-European is like essentially the Ice Age civilization. So whatever was around 12,000 BC was whatever empire was existing, that because you wouldn't, all of these people across, from Spain and the Caucasus and the Georgians and all the way into India, they wouldn't all be speaking the exact same language unless there was some sort of an organized society or culture or empire that was across that whole region. And of course, the language changed after the empire collapsed, but that's why we have the Proto-Indo-European language, because the fact that there was a unified language indicates to me, but nobody suggests this, nobody connects the dots. So I just thought I'd throw this up to you, because it's like they all agree there's the Proto-Indo-European language, but then they never extrapolate that to the conclusion of, well, clearly there must have been some kind of culture and people who were across this region that then collapsed. And so, they agree that the Proto-Indo-European language was pre, Ice Age, like 11,000, 12,000, before the impacts of the asteroids or whatever that wiped out a lot of people.
Yeah. Do you know Matthias de Stefano, that guy? He's this fella. He's very interesting. And I don't know. He claims to remember his past lives.
Well, that's not that hard.
Speak for yourself.
Just smoke some DMT, man. You can be right there. Or other medicines. There's powerful medicines out there that will help you access.
Well, outside of that,
yeah,
he just remembers them without medicine.
He's a special one. Yeah.
He's a special dude for sure.
Yeah,
and he talks about Atlantis and Atlantean, and can speak Atlantean, and sometimes does. And
cool.
I mean, who knows? He could be total wackadoo,
Yeah.
But it sounds very interesting. And, as far as I can tell, he seems like a genuine person.
Yeah, the BB stones out in the Atlantic Ocean seem to suggest, when the seas were lower, 150 feet lower, there was probably some massive cities that were all around the world. Atlantis was one. There was probably something south of India, Lemuria or whatever it was. And there's all those sages who came up, and there was the land bridge. Like that was a constructed land bridge that connected Sri Lanka to the tip of India. It's man-made.
Okay.
Very long time ago.
That's amazing. It seems like a very long time since we were cave people. And I don't know, I have no way of proving the theory of evolution. It does seem very interesting that when the fetus is formed, it goes through all these different life cycles. It goes through being a fish and a lizard and all kinds of different stuff before it becomes the human fetus. That seems very interesting.
I don't think it looks like a fish or a lizard at all. But I mean, I hear what you're saying.
I mean, according to science.
No, I know. I think I read the article, but
yeah,
it's a trip. Yeah.
And I don't know. So certainly it seems very highly plausible that at some point there was like this massive civilization, and then what happened to them? Clearly, I mean, the Mayans aren't really that old, so it would be before that. But also, well,
the Mayans left after the Spaniard priests left the ship. So the very first Spanish ship that landed in the Mayan region, the priest, he didn't get back on the ship. He stayed with the Mayans. And it took them 7 years to come back with the fleet, with the Armada. So by the time they came back, the Mayans had already left 7 years later. The priest was able to communicate with them. And it's a codex that they found out of the Tulum ruins in the, I believe, 1900s, because when they came back, the Spaniards couldn't find Tulum. The jungle had overgrown it along the coast so fast that they weren't able to find it, I guess. And so the colonials never took out the codex. A lot of these temples would leave a book, a sacred book that would be encoded with their history and all kinds of things, what happened. And so this codex, when they found it, it tells very clearly the story of the priest. He told him, he said, your culture is more advanced, your architecture is more advanced. The people who are coming are brutal people who are going to kill you all. You should run. And so it details how they were going to run to the highest place in the mountains they could. And so then there was an uncontacted tribe in the 1960s in the high mountains outside of Palenque, between Palenque and Chiapas, basically.
In Peru?
No, in Mexico.
Mexico. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
And those are the descendants of the Mayan. The Mayans speak Mayan all over the whole region. So the idea that the Mayans disappeared, right? That's a fallacy. That's a lie. They just said that so that everyone would say, "Oh, wow, the Mayans disappeared." No, they didn't disappear. There's Mayans everywhere. the whole Mayan region is full of Mayans who speak Mayan, and they're like the natives up here in the north. They've just been, they've lost their culture to some degree or another. Some people are more in touch with it than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. There was communication between the priest and the Mayans saying, hey, there's a bunch of people that are going to just murder all of you and enslave you because that's what they do. You better hightail it or else.
And it's interesting to think that it was his preference. He thought that the culture there was better.
Yeah.
He was going to have a higher quality of life if he stayed.
With the Mayans, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, have you been to Machu Picchu?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not the Mayans, but yeah.
Right. Who's that?
The Mayans are the Machu Picchu is the Incans in South America. Yeah, okay. That's where Peru. That's Peru. That's where the Wachuma's from. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the ancient people of Peru are very rich. Yeah.
Yeah, but how did they build Machu Picchu?
Yeah, that's a mystery, right? Who knows? How do they build the pyramids? I don't know. Hard work. Coca leaf. Probably a lot of coca leaf helped.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
But what's one interesting thing, if you're curious, is the royal Incans, which is the family of the royal Incans, they have an alternative skull than other humans. So they have like a deformity, like some oddity in their skull, which is interesting to think about. But it's also interesting if you think about it in the context that these people were. There was maybe a higher species of hominid, something that had like a larger head, like the Egyptian depictions and the Paracas skulls in Peru. There's these skulls that have different sutures and they're bigger, bigger brain. You can't force. I mean, you can warp the skull, but you can't make it have a bigger brain, bigger sized shape inside. But there's bigger brains and and they weigh different size and they have different sutures. Like you can't change the joints and the sutures in a species, but this one has different sutures. So I think that there was probably a tribe that was the descendants of maybe the Paracas or somebody. Eventually, over time, the Incas, have had that skull that was formed, and they probably had some interesting technologies and powers if they were part of those beings who were building those big cities back then. And I read this interesting book. You can't find it anywhere. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was called Project X or something like that. It was about this guy's study into the priests in these ancient cultures, and they would build these platforms because they had attained. They had these mirrored devices that they would use. They could actually, through casting shadows and light of these mirrored devices on these plateaus at different special times when the sun and stuff, whatever, they could actually see God. They could see this higher. They found a way to hack the system and find a way to have a relationship with a higher dimensional being. I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Transmutation, or the I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of what is it? Apotheosis, where you become God. A lot of spiritual traditions have the idea, this concept, like you do something in order to attain a godlike state, or to be, others say no, we're not about that. The gods are the gods and the men are the men. But Yeah, the world's so fascinating, right? Like, sometimes people might be listening to this show, say, "My God, what's this guy talking about? I never heard of any of these kinds of things, or something, or thought of these kinds of things." Well, great. Then it's a good thing that we had a podcast. You could get exposed to some new thoughts and ideas, and maybe some truths and reality, and look into it a little bit more. I find the world is fascinating the more I look into it.
Yeah,
it's not limiting. It's not limited. It's actually wild. The world is so wild.
Definitely. Yeah. I think one of the frustrations that I have, just to bring it back to being frustrated, is, that we're not really that interested in these kind of discussions, that this isn't like a kind of a typical dialogue where people are like really delving into what's the ancient history of all these traditions and what do they have to offer and what were they doing back then? We're so consumed with our own reality and, getting our basic needs met in the way that this society has figured out how to do that, which in terms of like getting the nice car and the nice house and all of the things, regardless of where it came from. Like we've really lost touch with, our spiritual root. And, that to me is supremely unfortunate. I wonder, obviously a lot of your work is kind of dedicated to helping people to explore that in a very visceral, real way, through doing medicine work, and also it sounds like also through your nonprofit, through Unify, to really get a sense of our shared humanity. And I wonder also, you mentioned earlier that there's part of this is that there's a celestial battle going on, potentially.
It doesn't even have to be battle. It could just be like, spiritual dimension. There's an exchange going on. There's a relationship that we are engaged with spiritual forces, beings, entities, things that we might not perceive, know, or understand doesn't take away their reality. Mm-hmm. The fact that when someone dies, the body's, decays and it's dissolved. Well, what happened to the spirit? Right. There's something that happens, and we have different theories, different religions. We say different things, but there is something there. There is a spiritual component to existence that's undeniable. And I'm just positing the fact that, well, if there is a spiritual dimension, yeah, it's not just like a blank thing. There's things in it. Mm-hmm. There's spiritual beings. There's spiritual systems, dynamics, and so if our physical world is in fact an expression or an outgrowth or an overlay within a spiritual world that we're actually enmeshed in, and, it's an interesting thing to think about time, right? Because if you go, like sometimes people have this emphasis of the past or this, but like, what if it's like our descendants are reverse engineering themselves into existence by creating our attractions to who we're attracted to. And we think that's me. This is mine. I'm attracted to this. This is my preference. But for all we know, they're manufacturing themselves because they know that, there's behind the veil of our life, there might be like test tubes and rockets and boardrooms and people and, everyone's like able to see things that we can't see inside of our embodied human existence. And, it's like you get these stories of people who have near-death experiences. I've had them where you flash, your life flashes before your eyes and things like that. And yeah, I think that in every moment, there's a component to what energy spiritually we're feeding and what we're being fed by. Right. And it's like, who's our master and who are we supporting in that spiritual thing, and it's not necessarily just what church you go to or what prayers you make, but it's just like how we actually treat every person in our lives. How we, whether it's at the supermarket or our children, whoever. It's like that. One of my teachers say that's the measuring stick. If you want to know what's your measuring stick of your spiritual growth, it's how you treat people when you're triggered.
How do you talk to the guy at the gas station?
No, how you treat people when you're triggered. How do you treat people
when you're triggered?
How you handle your family. Right. Yeah. How you handle your family when it's holidays and you're triggered. Like that's the spiritual, like when you're really upset, how you handle that. Yeah. That's how we measure it.
That's definitely accurate.
Yeah.
And that's also, pointing to kind of circling it back a little bit to the idea that, a lot of these negative energies and wars are feeding different energies that are out there somewhere that are consuming the energy of children dying and et cetera, which, obviously most of us are not doing those kind of things, but we do have a detector that's constantly activated, and we can tell how it is that we're behaving and sort of what kind of energies we're aligning with by how it is that we experience reality, and whether or not we're, something that I've been conscious of particularly lately, because little annoying things. I had a little dispute with my neighbor, which I was telling you about earlier. And so then how do I handle that? Do I act in an unneighborly way, or do I just communicate my truth and just let it go because it's not that important for me to be right, even though there is a burning hot desire for me to be right, for me to just say, go stuff it, lady. And I'm not obeying your rules because it's not the law, and I don't have to obey your rules. I could have done that, and I could have fought that battle, and I could have gotten my other neighbors riled up about it, and I would have won. But I would have lost, because then I would have this
rancor.
I would have this rancor between the person me and the person who lives right next door to me, and there would be this thing. We would have this feud, and it would. Why is that? Why would that even be worth it? But moreover, it's
because you could be right. And that's some people would rather be right than have a good relationship with their spouse,
yes,
or their kid,
most people,
or their neighbor.
Unfortunately, yeah, I think unfortunately most people, there's a whole. Christine and I met at Landmark Education, which,
it's great stuff.
Yeah, great stuff. fundamentally, everybody wants to be right at all costs, and we'll die being right, and we just don't care. And if you're able to give up being right
to be loving,
or to be however it is that you want to be, and to recognize, it's not just about me being right. It's about that I've created a story around that about myself that has a negative implication because of that person, and now I'm blaming them for it. But really, it's just that I'm the one who's choosing to believe the story that there's something wrong with me. And so, if I can see that I've created this story, then there's liberation. But if I'm still stuck with the idea that, she wronged me because she, whatever, doesn't want me to do the thing that I want to do in my backyard, if I continue to hold that true, then I'm still enslaved by that modality, and I'm still fighting with myself and with her, and not being in right relation. And by the way, there's no way I can be in some sort of a spiritual way of being if I'm in that kind of fight. I can't. It's an automatic separation. There's me and her. There's us and them. And so I just bring that up because there's so many little tiny things that happen in my life that I'm conscious of, that I'm like, well, how am I being right now? What am I? What's the problem? Especially with my wife, when I get triggered. That's something we've been working really hard on lately, is what happens when we get triggered, and how do we identify the source of the trigger? How far and how deep does that go back into my own childhood? And then looking at that, and then looking at her. And what's beautiful and fascinating about that, as a married man, I'm a young married man in terms of the marriage thing. We've been at it for 2 years now. We've been together.
Congratulations.
Thanks. We've been together for 5, but what I notice is the more that I'm looking at why am I getting triggered, and what's the source of that, versus there's something wrong with her and I'm just annoyed with her, where I'm not looking at it, right? Where I'm blaming her. The more that I look to myself, I look inward, the more beautiful she becomes to me. Viscerally, literally, in the moment, in the now. I'm more conscious of how much I love this woman, how much I appreciate her, because I'm not blaming her for all these, when I get triggered. I'm liberating myself, but I'm also liberating her in taking ownership, taking responsibility for how I'm being, and consciously being aware of my consciousness, such that I am disowning that egotistical, I have to be right need that's so pervasive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. It's you and everyone can benefit from programming curiosity into the mix, so that when there's it gets crunchy, when you get triggered, oh, let me get really curious and interested in, what's going on here? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow, a big feeling. Oh, interesting. Let me look into that kind of thing, instead of let me ignore that, let me deny that, let me run from that, let me numb that, let me whatever the thing
numb
is,
it, especially escape it,
deny.
get out of it.
Yep.
Lean out. And then it just gets bigger.
Yeah, or alternate it somehow. So I think the that aspect, that quality of curiosity, which is so innocent and latent, and natural and innate to being a human, to being a kid, we're just curious, right? And you can be a grown up, you can be 90 years old and you find yourself so curious in something. And so we can make ourselves curious too. We can decide that we want to be curious in something if we choose to be curious in our own healing and our own growth. Like you said, you get triggered and then you go uproot it, and then so you choose. You can make amazing progress in reprogramming, rebooting one's operating system, one's interface system, how one experiences and perceives and sees reality, and the quality of life that one has. I mean, I've seen so many transformational, like Landmark, a lot of transformational people. They go there, and whole life changes. Somebody goes to a single ceremony, their whole life can change.
For sure.
Somebody does the same thing every day, like a discipline creates a new habit after, a couple months, then their whole life changes because they got a new habit. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm more curious in being loving than right.
Yes, indeed.
And so, we'll ultimately find ourselves wherever we're most drawn to, wherever we're most curious, right? To check out. And if one gets fed up, like I'm, get fed up with doing the same thing all the time, right? Like having the same kind of argument or falling in the same hole every day. Well, it's like, hey, I get curious. How do I fix that hole or not go that way? Mm-hmm. And so I think that
you've been down that road before, Neo.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's
Neo's an apotheosis reference too, for sure. He's classic hero's journey. Yeah
100%. Mm-hmm. So that's a really good bridge. I was going to say, curiosity and gratitude are also gratitude's a really great way to just get out of it when you're triggered, to just stop and say, well, what am I grateful for right now? It's so hard, but then it's not. It's so hard when you're really triggered to just stop and be like, okay, what am I really grateful for right now? And make a little list for myself. I do that a lot. For me, it's a real gateway to being loving. And I love what you said. You're more curious about being loving than being right, which is the next thing that I want to talk about.
Because it's hard. It's not easy to be loving. You know what I'm saying? I like challenge, right? Like I like things that are tricky sometimes. And boy, oh boy, is it tricky to be loving all the time, right? 100%. Like, because I'm trying, and I'm 41.
Yeah.
And I'm getting better at it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's easy. It's not like I'm getting better at it easily. It takes effort. It takes getting to the edge of one's capacity where one's triggered, and then taking the breath in and finding the release, finding the way to get curious and shift it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we don't have to get triggered the same way all the time, because that's the goal, right? We don't just stay triggered our whole life, whatever series of triggered. We eventually want to become what? A wise elder.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's what I'm after.
Happy, wise elder.
Yeah.
And I think that's missing a lot in our society and culture. Like, oh, what's your goal? Yeah, I'm just going to become rich and in a home or something.
Right.
I don't know. Like
rich and famous
or old and dead. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think becoming a meaningful elder who has stories that are worth sharing, that can impart a culture to the incoming kids and youth that's worth repeating,
right?
That's worth remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our goal now is like, we're all the descendants of these slaves and slavers, right? That's who we are. We're all the descendants of the slaves and slavers. So we're all victims, we're all messed up. We're all coming from this traumatized bloodline of fill in the blank. Like it's all terrible, upwards, downwards, sideways, everywhere you paint it. And so it's like, here we are. Well, now what? Are we
Right.
just going to keep doing that? Well,
Yeah.
that's not interesting to me. I'm sorry. I'm more curious in how we shift that, like you say, how we break that mold, and how we find a way to have a different consciousness, and they're in a different reality.
Yeah.
One where there's enough. Right now there's a lot of scarcity where there's like, oh, well, I can't, if Geoff has it, then I can't have it, right? There's only so much that can go around. And so now Geoff and I got to fight over who gets to have it. And it's like, no,
Right.
that's artificial, man. There's actually so much.
That's why
there's
we're
more
friends.
than enough. Yeah.
Because you're not trying to take my shit.
No, man.
I love where this is going. It occurs to me also like the curiosity gateway. Viktor Frankl. I mean, I love Vic. Man's Search for Meaning. Which, if you're not familiar with that book, highly recommend it. It's short, and he was in the Holocaust, and he got really curious about how it is that people could be whether or not a human being could survive such levels of torture. Basically, he became the object of his own experiment, which in so many ways allowed him to exist and live. And then, of course, when he got out, he forgave the Nazis, which was a gift that he gave really himself. And he talks about that in his book, but it all came out of originally his curiosity about, well, how can a human being actually survive this level of torment? And he put himself into that mindscape, which really allowed him to allowed him to survive, but also gave him a much greater sense of purpose, which he was then able to share with people after he came back.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. It's inspiring to me what you say, because it makes me think about the fact that, in order to achieve the Holocaust, right, you had to lay the foundation. You don't just achieve anything without a foundation, without a plan, without a series of events and stuff. So the Holocaust was a long time in the making. It didn't just happen overnight. And so in order to achieve that, there had to be a way whereupon it was easy to dehumanize the Jews. It was easy and natural and normal to regard them as non-human or less than self, right? Like as this inferior thing. And the reason I mention it is because it's the same dynamic going on in Israel with the Palestinians right now, whereupon the both sides, I'm not going to say just one, but there's such entrenched generational pain that each side is essentially raised in a way where they think the other side is less than self, right? Is less, the Arabs, the Jews think the Arabs are less than human. They don't deserve the same as them, right? And then a lot of times the Arabs, are raised in a world where they just don't even interact with a Jew. All they know, all they hear are these stories of, they're just killing babies and eating them or something like that, It's something weird. They're a monster. So
it's in their textbooks.
Yeah, it's in their textbooks, exactly. So you get kids. This, so in order to achieve these horrors, these terrible things, what has to happen? Well, you've got to get a person, a people, a group, or whatever, to start to take the humanity out of somebody else. And there's this conflict that we have going on right now on all levels.
Yeah, really, anywhere there's war, there has to be dehumanizing of the other side. Otherwise, it can't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so where that war is going on in any given moment is in our consciousness. Like at any given moment today around the world, how many people are on Earth dehumanizing someone else or whatever it is. And so it takes us culturally as a species to begin to kind of wake up from this illusion that we are separate or different from each other. That whole thing that enables it, because you can't have one without the other. So but it's all in that consciousness. And so I love where you were saying with your friend, the survivor of the Holocaust, because
he's not my friend, but I love him.
The author,
Viktor Frankl. Yeah.
Viktor Frankl. Yeah. Because the truth that is, you can't kill the human spirit. You find these children or whoever they are, people who have been lost to everything, and then they find a way to help and give back and do whatever it is. You never find a shortage of inspiration and faith. Like I've traveled, so fortunate. I've traveled to 60 countries in my life so far. I got to travel a lot when I was young. And I interviewed everybody I went. I was always trying to, kind of figure out what the world was. That's how I started Project Empathy, my first nonprofit. When I was 18, I founded a project called Project Empathy. I determined by that stage in my life as 18-year-old that what the species needed was empathy. So I was full blown into empathy. So I went to Asia, and I was doing microphilanthropy and photojournalism to try to take people on the healing journey I was on, so they could see that the people around the world were just like them and make better decisions with their dollar and their choices, because they're moving from a place of coherence and connectivity. So Project Empathy was the outgrowth of the other pilgrimage, where I was, hitchhiking throughout South America from Alaska to Peru, interviewing people along the way, reading the Bible, reading different things, trying to find, what's real, what's really going on. I came of age. I'm a young man, and, the world is a mess. It's run by psychopaths, apparently, pedophilia, psychopaths, apparently. It seems to be going on.
Maybe.
Like, oh shit. Yeah. How do I wake up a little bit more and figure out a way to be of service and to help, and what the species might need. And so that was the outgrowth, the roots of Unify, because I started with Project Empathy, like, hey, how can I connect the world and change its consciousness, elevate its consciousness? And similarly, other projects have had, Evolve Culture, media, or other things like that, how to create media that is evolutionary in its nature, so that the consciousness of the person or the people who receive it is forever changed, right? Because that's what we really need, is a shift in consciousness on Earth. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just want to say I'm so inspired by you wanting to do this podcast with me, because I want to do a podcast. I want to do my own podcast. And so this is inspiring me, because I'm going to invite you to my podcast once I get it up and running. You won't be my first guest. You won't be my 71st.
Okay.
Somewhere in the middle. Yeah, somewhere in the middle.
I like it.
Yeah.
I would be honored. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I know we're kind of running out of time. Well, whatever. It's really up to me.
If time even is real.
If time even is real. The meter says that we're at about an hour and a half, but that's okay. Yeah. I have to cut out. There was the whole pee break. That was at least 5 minutes,
This is great.
But one of the things I love talking about this show is I have this idea about the love operating system versus the fear operating system. And I'm very curious about the love operating system. And I talk about it a lot. And it basically just is a contextual question, right? Like, how do I love more? If I'm asking myself, how do I love more in this life? Then how do I behave? How do I love more? How do I give more love? How do I receive more love? How do I experience more love? How do I make more love? Not from a sexy, although maybe that too, like, how do I create more love in my life? How do I love more? And it automatically, if I have that in the back of my mind and I engage with it from time to time, which usually is when I'm recording this podcast, then I really start to think about, well, what would that look like? What could I do that's going to express and give more love and have me experience more love? And that, as you said earlier, it is hard to do that sometimes. The temptation to not love is always there, and the culture in which we live is very fear-based, and we're being fed all of this fear. And so it's like challenging. It's like
you got to be brave.
You really have to be brave and bold and courageous.
Yeah.
To love in the face of fear.
Yeah.
But it always pays off.
And the pain of loss of love. Yeah. It's so vulnerable to love.
That's true. And love also in opening myself up, oneself up, yourself up, themself up, whatever, however you do your things. In opening yourself up to love, you're gonna, automatically I experience way more of the grief that is preventing me from experiencing that more full time. So then I have an experience where I'll cry and weep about things. A lot of times in medicine work, and a lot of times outside of medicine work, or just in prayer work or meditation, like, it just comes up for me. But I love that. I love this idea of constantly asking that, embracing the love operating system as like a way of being, something that is intentional and is in answer to so much of the chaos that we see around us, and also in answer to all the things that are enslaving me. Because when I look at my own life, where it is that I'm stuck and I'm and I'm frustrated and I'm upset. It's all from this fear-based place. I'm afraid that I am not enough in some way, and I've interpreted that and pointed it at somebody else or something else or some other entity, so that I can maintain this identity of not enoughness, versus embracing this idea of love. Well, how do I love that guy? What does that guy need that's suffering? What does my inner child need, or my inner self, or my just this Geoff need right now? And love really is the answer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I know so much of like your work and what you're about is dedicated to that concept, and really without kind of the love highway, there's no way we can see our interconnection.
Yeah. It's nothing woo-woo about it. It's just the hard facts of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of love, man.
And I think that's what, you look at all of our greatest heroes, they were all big lovers of life. It's not like some I'm just gonna go down to Tulum and I'm gonna experience oneness and I'm just gonna love everybody and that's gonna be what it is. It's much more of a fierce, how do I love my neighbor, even though she, on the face of it, might be being kind of a whoopsie doodle. How do I love her regardless? How do I see that where she's coming from is
well, one
place.
Easy way is anytime someone upsets you, you just regard them as your holy teacher. So any human who elicits a negative emotional response, any person, whoever they happen to be in your life, who makes you just want to murder them, or be angry or scream or curse or whatever, that's your teacher. And so if you have a respect for your teacher, well, there's the trigger flag on the field. There's the prayer. Get humbled face down to the earth. Okay, what do I have to learn here? Yeah. Thank you, teacher.
Right.
Thank you, teacher.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that over to her. All right. That's great. So I asked this of all my guests. For you, Johnathan Human. Oh, first of all, have you considered changing your name to Johnathan Cactus?
No, I haven't.
It's not on the agenda. It's not part of the mix.
Not yet. No, thank you though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Well, for free. It could be Johnathan Cactus Human.
No. My family's trying to get me to add a middle name, and I'll let you know when that is legal if it happens.
Okay. Yeah. You're not going to tell me in advance? It's a secret, state secret?
For now, it's just Johnathan Human. That's my legal name, man.
Okay.
That's who I am.
All right.
Yeah, there's not a show name there. That's just me.
That's it.
I legally changed my name in my 20s after coming back from Peru and drinking ayahuasca, and the beings who I interacted with down there made it very clear that I was to change my name and henceforth be known as Johnathan Human. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Mm-hmm. All right. That seems like that's going to be in part 2, everybody. We're going to talk about that whole experience. But for you, Johnathan, what is sacred and what is insane?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know how to answer it. I'll just say that, I like crazy wisdom. I like that like sacred line that's also crazy and insane. It's called crazy wisdom. You know what I'm talking about? There's a whole branch. There's like books on it. There's people who are they're crazy wisdom people. And I think that the psychiatric industry is fledgling in its understanding of humanity and consciousness. And it's barbaric and evil in a variety of ways as well, depending how you look at it over the history and how it's implemented its goals to learn about the brain.
True.
Yeah. So, I think that to be well adjusted to such an insane system that we currently live in on Earth would be sick. So it's a sign of health to be out of alignment with a sick system. And so it's a relative question, because if you are, pro-vaccine, then if you are anti-vaccine, then you're, or anti-gene therapy, then you're, so it's like, so how do we unify? How do we come together? And for me, the insanity is all around us, and it's normal. It's poison in our food and drinking water. It's, it's things like that. It's just, hey, why are we putting poison in our food and drinking water, man? Like, why don't we fix those things? Why don't we address some of the basic glaring issues that are wrong with our actual society? What and who is profiting, and why are they profiting so much that they are continually finding new ways to divide us as a people, to make us hate each other, and to find a polarization or a tribalization or a side, whether it's racial or ethnic, demographic, geo-regional, you name it. It's all the same dynamic, which is like almost Khazarian, this, getting, different sides to fight against each other, and it's to cite, some, ancient times. It's like, where are we feeding the fuel inside of us? And so for me, the sanity, what's sacred, is sanity. Sanity is sacred to me. What is sacred is what we treat as sacred. So that's an important teaching in our church here. Is it's like, you could, go to visit a different place and they treat something sacred that we didn't think treat as sacred. Like for us, we treat dogs and cats as sacred. Other people don't. Other people treat cows as sacred. We don't. Right. So there's all kinds of ways that people can decide something is or is not sacred. You can, the mother is sacred. Elders are sacred. Children are sacred, or they're not. So I think that what is sacred is the sacred. It's important that humans have a relationship with the sacred, and they're going to have mental illness and all kinds of societal ills if they don't have a relationship with the sacred that's effective, that's true, that's real, that's not a sham. And so to be real, it's going to be aligned with the souls, the solar and the lunar, so it's going to be on the equinoxes and the solstices. Because it's planetary, it's harmonic. We're in an electromagnetic spiritual universe. Everything's hitting the nines at the same time, right? And so we want to be riding that wave. We want to be riding the wave of the ocean of the now, which is the sacred now. And there's nothing insane about it. The insanity thing is to go against our nature. The insanity thing is to sit there all day on our phone when we know that's going to cause mental illness, instead of getting outside and talking to people and being analog. If we know something's going to cause insanity, it's insane to keep doing that thing over and over again, and you think you're going to get a different result. Mm-hmm. So, for me, I had to learn very early on that sanity was sacred, and I had to it's a lifelong journey to me to differentiate what's insane and what's not, right? And because if you're just a young person growing up this world, there's such an imperative, hardwired, programmed instinct to just merge with your peer group and to find a peer group. But if everybody's peer group's contaminated with a sick culture that doesn't understand right from wrong, or up from down, or back from forwards, or the past from the future, or whatever it is, well then everybody's lost in there. And so I think that lineages and traditions are sacred, the elements are sacred, the seasons are sacred. I think that prioritizing our relations, having right relations with our community, people, whether it's your neighbor, physical neighbor right here, like you're saying, you're prioritizing that as a good relation. And I think that's sane. Mm-hmm. That would be insane, like you were saying, to cause a feud with your neighbor. Yeah. It might feel good, but that's actually insane. That's mental illness. And that's what most people have and are operating under. And so we do live in this mentally, like the memes and the people on the TV and the people on the TV shows and the people in the movies, they're expressing sick consciousness, which is absorbed by the people who, the kids, everyone who watches it, and then they mimic it and they mirror it back to themselves. And that's our refracted holographic world we live in, is all these people who've been programmed by an advertising industry for 100+ years that's distorted and warped our whole species, our whole, manufactured desires and urges and needs that we never even had, whether it's like the death thing where, like the lobotomy, you put people with chemicals and stuff in a box, that wasn't even a thing till the Civil War. But, then it was like somebody was making a lot of money, and so they wanted to keep making money. So they didn't want anyone to affect their bottom line. There's so many things like that where if you start looking, you get to a real simple human story. And it's fascinating. Like sometimes people want to demonize people. Like they'll say, "Oh, Rockefeller was a bad guy. He took over natural medicine and made it allopathic." But what nobody really pays any attention to research and understand is that John D. Rockefeller Sr., the founder of the oil company, his dad was a snake oil salesman. So he didn't like that. He thought that was pretty up, that this guy was just selling snake oil to people and traveling around and was never there. So when he was older and he had all the money in the world, guess what he wanted to do? Put all the snake oilsmen out of business, the quacks, the people who were doing ineffective natural medicine that wasn't real. So he had a good intention and he did some really amazing things. But he's demonified now because, Western medicine, is taken away, or some people demonified him, but he's human. He had a dad and he had a story, just like whether it's Jesus or you or me, we all have a dad, and we all have a story or relationship with our dad and with our mom and with our grandmother or ancestors, if we're lucky enough to, and so I think that it's insane that we aren't creating cultural stories and shows and programming and content and interactions and things that are affirming human culture, that are affirming the positive things, the sacred, affirming the sacred law, the natural law, So I think we need to get back to natural law, sacred law, and get out of being crazy. And that takes being out of our head to a degree, because it's easy to get crazy and you sit in your head by yourself, right? You got to get out of your head, into your heart, talking to people, interacting, having feelings, and so that's what we need a lot more of in this world. I think it's insane how people are isolated, and I just want to bring people analog, human gatherings, bring people together, whether it's a small ceremony or all over the world at the same time. So
beautiful, amazing.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thanks, man.
That was a really good answer. That's the longest answer I've had to that question.
Okay, great. Glad I could get it another first.
And it was really good. It was a very good answer. You really delved in to the meat and potatoes of the whole sacred and insanity thing.
I'm glad I was beautiful. So unprepared too.
Huh?
I wasn't prepared.
But you were.
I know.
You were.
Thank you.
I'm glad I asked the question. You've been ready for that question for a long time.
There you go. There you go.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to say to the world before we wrap it up?
Well, check us out at unified.org.
How do people find you?
Human is my last name, at unified.org is my email. I have a poetry website, jhuman.net, jhuman.net. You can get some books.
I have to check that out.
CDs. If you check me out online, j.human on Spotify and Apple Music. I've got 3 albums on there. If you feel like going on a journey, those are, hip hop, poetry, spiritual rap albums from over 10 years ago. And let's see, I'm wearing my wife's shirt, Sierra Soul Camp. She's got a great camp up here in the Sierras. If you're ever coming up to the Sierra Nevadas, check out Longview Chateau or Iron Gate Villa. Those are some Airbnbs I manage. And that's about it, man. Wachumans, the church, Wachumans at Gmail would be another email if you're interested in ceremonies.
Highly recommend.
WACHUMANS@gmail.com. Alrighty.
Awesome. That's great. And if you want to support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Lunacy podcast. If you're interested in doing some sort of if you're interested in doing some sort of sponsorship or anything with me, or you want to do some advertising, I'd love to talk to you about it. Get me at info@geoffeido.com. That's info@geoffeido.com. Much love, everybody. This has been awesome. Thank you, Johnathan, for joining me. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Geoff. Take care, everybody.